Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name's Hayden.
And this week we're going to be diving into the question, has creativity died in the classroom?
Why is creativity even important in the first place?
And how so many schools are self-inflicting rigid schemes that are stifling creativity in the classroom. So if we're thinking about creativity and if it's died in the classroom, I think there are two prongs we have to talk about. One prong is obviously going to be within the classroom, what the teacher is actually doing to deliver the lessons and how creative it can be for the children, and also the kind of decisions schools are making on how lessons are delivered. I think that's really important and we'll come on to that later. But I think we have to talk about the pressure from external forces, i.e. the government funding, even Ofsted, for example, or the curriculum, etc., from the top down, putting that pressure on. And we see this in the statistics. And I want to just start off by reading some statistics to you, because when we're talking about creativity, we're thinking more secondary school as well, about subjects, right?
Yeah.
And we're thinking about the importance that's placed on English and maths. And I think it's absolutely right that they are placed on a pedestal. I think it's more important that children can read and understand numbers. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But the issue comes when that transfers to, so everything else is pointless.
Right.
No. Listen to these statistics and see if your jaw was on the floor as quickly as mine was.
Okay.
So since the launch in 2010 of the EBAC performance measure, which excludes art subjects.
Okay.
So again, that's a big hint as to where this might have gone.
Yep.
There has been an overall decline of 42% in arts GCSE entries and a 21% drop in such entries at A level. But here's the kicker. Here's the one that really, really got me. More than 40% of schools no longer enter any pupils, zero, for GCSE, music, or drama.
That's a lot of schools.
More than 40% of schools don't enter any children for music, GCSE, or drama.
That makes me feel kind of sad.
Yeah, it is sad.
It was such a huge part of growing up.
Yeah. So why does it make you feel sad? Why is this important? How does it link with creativity? Why are these subjects vital?
Because creativity is a high order skill that we need. It is essential. It's not just like some fluffy thing that we say, oh, being creative, yeah. Oh, can you put some pictures on your... That's not what creativity is. It's a really important skill. It boosts confidence. It's good for emotional intelligence. And these subjects, I'm sure this sounds really obvious, but these subjects are rooted in being creative far more than the academic subjects. Yeah, I'm not saying you don't get any creativity in English and maths, but obviously in drama and art and music, I am fundamentally being considerably more creative, right? So if these subjects aren't being explored, like 40% of schools have zero kids doing some of these subjects, that's mad to me. They're not being exposed to enough opportunities to be creative. They're not developing this skill, which is important.
Absolutely. And if we look at what skills we're developing in general, right? When we put these other subjects on a pedestal, and again, I'm not going to sit here and be the person to say that it's just as important every single child in the country can read and write as it is that every single child in the country can play the piano. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Okay. We understand that's just not true. But we have to put these subjects where they belong, which is of high importance as well. And people just brushing it off and saying, yeah, well, who cares about if you can play an instrument or if you could do drama? You really are misunderstanding what these subjects can bring to the table. And like you said, how important creativity is. It is completely insane that we just disregard them. And this is happening from external sources. So when schools are judged on how well they are doing in a performance table, that doesn't take into account how well children are doing in that really important part of their development. Of course, schools are going to end up seeing this kind of thing happen where children aren't doing it at all. And look, I've just got to think back to when I was in school. I did GCSE drama. I think if I had to pick a single course that I did in my time in education that transformed me as a person for the better, it was my GCSE drama course. Yeah. Because it instilled so much more confidence in me. It brought me out of my shell. It helped me interact with people a lot more because you were in a group working on a performance that you were doing. Yep. It just, I think, completely transformed my personality in a really positive way. And there'll be some people now saying it was a shame because it means you do this podcast now. You're more confident, isn't that? I don't want to listen to you talk on and on.
Yeah.
But realistically, if I then think about what I went on to do in my career, which was teaching, it had a huge impact. Yeah. And it really helped my self-confidence. And here's where it's the real kicker for those types of people who kind of say, oh no, it's just the arts. Who cares about that? Do you know what it did? It made me a more functioning member of society.
Yeah.
It made me more able to go and be confident in my job. It made me less of a recluse. It made me more social. It made me be able to contribute to the whole way more because I grew in that confidence. I grew in that ability to work with people.
I have to second that. And do you know what else it made me do? Genuinely, it made me go to school. I loved the arts. Like genuinely, my passions at school were maths, which is separate. I did just love maths. But realistically, I came to school because I liked drama, music, and art. They were my absolute favorites. And honestly, that is what got me up. I wanted to go to school because I love those subjects. And funnily enough, just to add to kind of what you were saying, it did really help me to develop my creativity in English as well. Because you know what the best grade I ever got in English was when we did a unit on writing a play script. It was like, that was the best thing. That was the most praise I ever got in English. And it was the highest score I ever got from my creative writing. And I was like, oh yeah, it's because I was being creative in this subject. So it does exist in the other subjects. But I really would not have had the chance to develop those skills if I didn't come into school loving drama, art, music.
It's a crux for so many children, isn't it? It gets them in. And we talk about the absence crisis all the time. The absence crisis is insanely complicated. There's loads of reasons why we're in this moment now where there aren't as many children in school as there used to be. But one part of that surely has to be, if we're seeing statistics like this, where those subjects, which are a huge part of other people's lives, are simply not even being offered anymore, or aren't even a part of the curriculum, or are not something that the school place any value on because it's not how they're judged at the end of the day. Of course, there's going to be a select group of children who think, well, what's the point of me being there?
Yeah.
You're not catering to me at all. We've spoken to people before who had dyslexia, who, for their whole school life, even when they took these creative subjects, were constantly judged on a bar that's the more traditionally academic of, well, can you write an essay about your music, please?
Yeah.
Well, does it not matter that I'm really good at playing these instruments and I can compose unbelievable music? Oh, but it comes to an essay and I physically can't do that because I have literal dyslexia and I can't reach these levels. Oh, so now you don't pass music.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's madness. I even thinking back to coursework when I was at school. Whenever there was an element of coursework, right, with art that didn't involve me literally just sitting down and drawing something or doing some piece of art that I really enjoyed, I just didn't do it and it knocked my grades down. And I was always like, oh, but look at my drawings, look at my paintings. I appreciate most of the coursework was revolved around that. But when it was like, oh, now you've got to write a 500-word piece that evaluates how an artist inspired you for this. But I was like, oh, I just really wanted to do the art at that time. And yeah, it's the idea that that's been amplified even more just puts me off. And one other thing that just makes me even more sad, and maybe it's getting a bit depressing here, so I apologize, is that in areas of higher deprivation, this is amplified even further. And I think there's a few factors to this. One of the most obvious ones that pops to your mind is in areas of high deprivation, they're working harder to try and bring up the academic scores, the things that are tracked based on this, the stats you're talking about from 2010. So it makes sense that in those areas that they're having even less access to the arts, which is just, yeah.
And do you know what the worst thing about that is again, you get this subset of society who will argue and say it's pointless. Yeah. There's people who say, well, art's pointless. What's art? Why am I funding art with my taxpayer money, etc.? I think we've already established how it can be really important for children to do, not only to get them into school, to have the other academic subjects as well, but as a thing on its own. Let's not degrade it. I'm not using art as a gateway to getting English and maths. Do you know, art has its own right of being its own really important subject for a bunch of children in our society, and drama and music, etc. But when it comes to state schools and funding being squeezed so much that these aren't actually tracked and therefore can be kicked to one side, what we are essentially saying, if we are okay with that, is that arts are for rich people. Arts are for the children who can afford to go to classes outside of school and do it. Yeah. Arts are for private schools who have the money to be able to fund this. Because when you think about what music is, it's way more expensive to run a music course than it is an English course because you've got the instruments to buy. Yep. Drama courses, you may think, well, you're not writing as much, so it's not academically as viable as this other thing, because how can I see that? You're just doing your drama act on the stage. Well, yeah, you've got lights to pay for. Yeah. You've got so much that goes into it. And because it's not on paper, we might see it as less valuable because it's so much harder to track. Who cares? And if the end goal of this is to get the academic subjects higher up on a pedestal because they're more important, don't equate that with me saying they're not important when I say drama is. It's not the same thing. And yeah, it's so sad to me that it is more and more and more moving towards, the arts are for people who go to private school or rich people who can afford to do it themselves. We have to ring fence and defend it because society is not just about, can you write an essay? That's not how it works. And this is what winds me up so much about when you get to secondary school. We work in primary school and it's different because we need to get children to read. You have to be able to read. So that's really, really important. When we're in secondary school and you're doing your English GCSE, and I remember doing Of Mice and Men, and I was sat there, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing before anyone jumps down my throat, but I remember breaking down the themes of Steinbeck or looking at a Shakespeare play and thinking, oh, what did Shakespeare mean when Macbeth did this thing? What's it representing? All valid ways of learning. Okay, cool. But don't sit there and pretend to me that as a functioning member of society when I leave school, it's way more important that I can discuss the different themes throughout different books in history that are complete fiction compared to, can I work in a group to create something that's meaningful for me or has an impact on other people through music or through drama? They are equatable.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, let's go deeper with this. Let's talk about importance a bit more. The government, or everything we've looked at, is suggesting that academic achievement, maths, English, is more important. That's kind of what we're inferring from this than the creative subjects, hence the drop-off, right?
Well, very quickly, maths and English, I think they're even weighted more. So even though arts aren't taken into account at all, you might take into account some history or some geography, etc. But then again, there's another level of maths and English are even more weighted and more important.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said earlier about the pedestal thing, right? Obviously, we need kids to read, right? But if we think about what a lot of these subjects, maybe let's think about history then. Let's go off tangent a bit from maths and English, right? What does it really involve, right? Is it about retrieving facts in history? Is history all about learning facts and retrieving those facts and then regurgitating those facts? And are we saying that therefore, because we track it, is more important than the creative arts? Is that kind of where we're going with this?
So I did, full disclosure, I did history GCSE, I did history A level, and I've got a degree in history. I love history. So I think it's brilliant. I think it's amazing. A huge part of my GCSE revision and my A level revision was memorizing facts and dates and things that happened. That was a huge part of what I did. But the part that I loved, the part that inspired me, the part that got me gripped by the stories of our time and how it might repeat itself, was my teacher making the narrative of history interesting. Was my teacher discussing about how political cartoons in newspapers have a bias and bring in comedy and help show a different point of view. The thing that got me really hooked was actually being able to, as a historian, think historically and be able to judge whether sources were more viable than others when discussing and debating what happened. Different points of view from different members of society, looking at it from the point of view of someone in World War II who lived in a terraced house where they were bombed in the next road along, and then looking at it from the point of view of someone in the cabinet who was making decisions on whether or not we should be invading different countries or not. All of this coming together, and then looking at newspaper articles who were funded by this person and what their view or their agenda might have been compared to maybe a government document where they were trying to make sure the people were not worried too much about something or hiding something, compared to on the street filming a man talk about his experience. The thing that got me about history was almost this creative part of putting these things together. Understanding the outside view of everything at once. That piqued my interest way more than remembering, oh, the Battle of the Boyne was on this time. Okay, cool. I can find out in 10 seconds. I can just Google that now. That knowledge, that fact, that understanding of this exact date, although not a bad thing to know, isn't going to actually hold me back as I enter society, as I become a historian. What makes a good historian is someone who can interpret things, is someone who can be given new information or told, well, this happened back then. What do you think? Well, let me interpret the sources. Let me take everything in. Cool. I'm going to learn as I go these retrieval facts, but the act of actually understanding what's going on is way, way, way more valuable.
Yeah. And just to be really clear of what you're saying, the skill of being creative is about evaluating, refining ideas, generating new ideas. Everything you were saying there, I'm glad you said it, because I was thinking this is all in the realms of being creative, not in the realms of retrieving stuff. Yet when we do an exam, it's all about retrieving information from your mind and putting it down. And I feel like what you're kind of saying here is what I was trying to allude to, which is that there is an argument to say that being creative could even be a more important skill than being able to retrieve facts. Because do you know what the irony is, like you were saying there, is we live in a world where it's the easiest ever to retrieve facts. You know what? I don't even need to. I would just open up AI, Google, whatever it is, and I'll just find that fact instantaneously. What I can't do is tap into something like that just allows me to be creative.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense. It's a skill you need to develop. So just to finish off this conversation, I think it's a real shame that we're seeing it's not even a small decline, such a significant decline in the creative arts in schools where children have the opportunity to develop this skill of creativity. It's a shame.
Let's dive deeper into creativity in general, lesson to lesson as a teacher, because I think there's these external factors we're talking about here, but I do think a lot of teachers and a lot of schools are kind of self-imposing a move to a lot more draconian, do this in your lesson or else it's not going to be a good one. Let's talk about that.
Okay, Dylan, I feel like we've established the first prong pretty well. The whole idea that the creative arts and the actual subjects themselves are being stifled across schools, right? Now let's talk about prong number 2. You had your jaw on the floor once. Let's get your jaw on the floor again, because I think we need to talk about the fact that teachers write into us and they talk online all the time about how their creativity as a practitioner, as the person in a classroom, that level of creativity is being stifled as well, with the idea that they must follow schemes a certain way, or they must follow their school rules of, we deliver lessons at this exact structure, we must do these things. They're being micromanaged to the point where they feel like they can't actually be creative in their role as a teacher.
Yeah, completely. And before I talk about this writing, I think the issue with that is not only, okay, it's kind of annoying as a professional because my job is I want to be creative and do things in engaging ways. The problem with that is actually what it has as a knock-on effect to the children in your class. Because when it's so formulaic, it becomes boring, it becomes uninspiring, and it can become way less creative for the children themselves as well. We had this writing. Okay, this is from a while ago. I've been sitting on this. But this, to me, summarized the problem that so many teachers have in school right now about creativity being completely dead in the classroom.
Hit me.
Here we go. Was listening today and thought it would be interesting to have your guys' take on prescriptive lesson formats. I'm in a small secondary academy, and for every PowerPoint lesson, for every subject, we need, number 1, silent retrieval practice slide. Same layout for everyone. Number 2, wait, but why slide, where we tell them what they've done already, what's in the lesson today, and what they're learning about after. Next one, clearly outlining where they can get praise points for that lesson before the lesson's even begun.
God.
What specific activities, etc., where they can get points. Specific logos for different tasks in the corner of each slide, i.e. examology. I do, we do, you do. A hinge question slide, still unsure on the purpose or what that even is. A bronze, silver, gold, platinum task slide. So that classic differentiation of here's 4 ways of doing this task, guys. You pick it because it's
taking
good.
me back.
4 to finish slide at the end. Basically tells them to stand behind their chair, be quiet, tuck your shirt in, and something else just as irrelevant. I know some academies are way worse, but by the time they get through all the box ticking slides for each lesson, you've got no actual time left to deliver the content.
I love the ending statement there. Once I've done all of this tick boxing and prescriptive stuff, I haven't got any time left to do my job, which is being a teacher.
Yeah, it's insane. And I think that is the ultimate version of micromanagement to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Is there a place for any of that, do you think? Like, is that completely insane? Or is there a place for some of it? Or should none of it exist? What's your thought? Because her point was she's been teaching for 10 years.
Yeah.
And her point is, look, the kids were fine before I snipped in this corner slide to say that this is the part of the lesson we're on.
I think all of it probably comes from a good place. Probably, right? I think all of if you really broke down why all of those things exist, there's probably some really good pedagogy behind that of like how we can help children learn by reminding them of what they're learning and things that really, the whole point is, as a professional teacher, like that's your job. You're doing them naturally because you're a professional teacher. I find it a bit patronizing. And the reason I find it patronizing is because that is my job. My job is to do those things seamlessly in my lesson anyway. That's why I went to university to train to be a teacher. That screams at me, all of our staff are unqualified teachers, and they don't need to do anything because we are so prescriptive. You don't even need to go to university because we'll just tell you exactly what to do. That's why I find it patronizing, and I don't like it.
The thing that really winds me up about these kind of stories is when you hear this, right? So this school's probably got a scheme as well. And this person was talking about how it takes so long to go through what you already have as a lesson to make it fit these, because everything needs to look like this now. The thing that winds me up more than anything is this turns teachers into people who genuinely stand at the front of the lesson and just read out slides and read out information that you've already got. You've bought into a scheme or you've planned something the exact same as everyone else. And when you get people online who say, teachers, they're overpaid, they get loads of time off, all they do is stand at the front of the lesson and just deliver what's on the slides, they're just reading. I'm like losing my ability to say you're wrong because there are schools like this where that is what's happening. And is it any wonder when schools are justifying having unqualified people deliver lessons, people who aren't qualified in their subject go into a classroom? Of course this is happening because it doesn't matter anymore what your credentials are as a teacher. It doesn't matter how creative you are. It doesn't matter how good you are at your job and doing all of the things that are in this list anyway, because it's literally a part of what you do. There's no way that I would teach a lesson without making links back to stuff we've already done. I'm a human being and that's my job. Of course I'm going to say, do you remember when we did this last week? We're using that skill again now to do this. I don't need to be told to put it in the corner of my slide that what I'm doing with the children now is retrieval practice. I know but it doesn't make them better at retrieval.
Oh no, the kids need to know. They need to know a meta level at all times of exactly what they're learning. They also need to know exactly how they can earn behavior points.
Yeah.
Well done. Everyone clap 3 times. It really goes down that line to me. I just don't like it. And if we're linking it to the point of this episode, which is all about creativity, and we're thinking now about creativity as teachers, right?
Yeah.
The problem I have with this is we're going down this route of teachers are deliverers and not designers. And the word design, like by definition, which is what we are, is rooted in being creative.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So what's your thought on this line? Because I have a lot of opinions. We must have fidelity to the scheme. So what do we even mean by that? And what's your opinion on it?
I think, I'll answer all your questions in once. I think firstly that it kind of comes from an Ofsted or top-down approach, right? And for this whole idea of fidelity to a scheme means if as a school you have sat down and justified buying into this scheme, you should be able to show that it's having an impact because you're using it properly. You must be able to justify why you purchased it in the first place. And if you purchased it, it must be because you think it's great. So therefore, you're using it thoroughly. That's, to me, the idea of this fidelity, is that you're using it completely and properly. And I think it goes just a little bit further to exclusively. Yeah, you're only using this, right? I think that's where the word fidelity comes in. And I've heard that buzzword loads in the last few years. But I just don't think it's right. I don't think that you have to use I'm doing quotation marks here, you have to use a scheme with fidelity to be good, to be a good teacher. I don't think that you have to use a scheme with fidelity to be able to deliver lessons to a certain standard. Like, I think you can pick and choose parts of schemes and still be really good at teaching lessons, you know?
There are some parts of schemes that are more important to follow as a whole school than others. Like, I always think of White Rose. I've used White Rose for a long time. We've led maths and said, we follow White Rose. And we've probably fallen into that trap before of saying, we use it with fidelity. We go to White Rose first. It's what we do. But one thing we've never done is say, you can't possibly supplement it with anything else. And the ultimate example of why, if you're in a school where you're using something like White Rose and you're told you cannot use anything else, the ultimate reason you can give as to why you are is because White Rose themselves literally deliver training on adaptive teaching and how to change your teaching to suit the children in front of you, where they say out loud, you should not be just printing off our worksheets and putting them in front of every single child. Because it's condescending to say to a group of professional teachers, like this person who wrote in, been teaching 10 years, we've been teaching 10 years between us as well. When you come into a teacher who's been doing it for that long, or even a newer teacher who's done all of the training, to then say you have to follow this, you are basically saying don't be adaptive anymore. Completely get rid of that teacher standard, which I know I put loads of importance on teacher standard 8 because I need someone to come to the cross country at the weekend. But the other teacher standard about being adaptive and changing on the spot and doing what the children need and planning to their needs, ignore that because we're fidelity to the scheme, baby.
And you know what? There'll be people again that say, yeah, we should be doing that. And again, it's the same people that also don't think that kids should be learning art at secondary school. This idea of, we'll just be robotic. And I just want to go back to the why. Why are we so passionate about this? Why do we feel like teachers need to have the freedom to be creative? For me, it's because creativity, if we think about what school is, right? Being creative as a teacher and the kids being creative is what inspires curiosity. And what is the point of primary school if not to inspire kids to be curious about the world and about specific things like, I don't know, subjects that we've made. We've put labels on certain things in the world. What is the point of school if it's not to do that?
Completely. And I think we're kind of crossing over now a bit, aren't we, in terms of, we've talked about the creative subjects, so the arts, but now we're very much speaking about from experience of, as a teacher, I feel like it's my job to inspire children to want to learn. Okay, that is part of my job. And people might boil it down to, well, my job's to deliver the curriculum. I'm going to stand here and read you the curriculum. If that was my job, I wouldn't need to go to university. All I need to be able to do is read, because I just read the curriculum out to the children. A massive chunk of my professional capability is at being adaptive, being creative, and getting the most out of the children in front of me, no matter who they are. That's probably, I think, the most important part of my job, is adapting to the needs of the children in front of me. And I've always said this, when I'm thinking about maths, for example, I will go off piste. I will make something up, because I know the end goals, I know the start of my children, and I know what makes them tick. And I know what's going to interest them. And it's been far, far too often in my career that I've sat there, got a history lesson, and I've thought, this is crazy in terms of, we're being expected to follow a scheme. This scheme says to do this in this lesson. It says we must go through 7 different tick boxes of, there has to be a retrieval question at the start. There has to be something at the end which revisits everything they've done previously. There has to be a quiz about knowledge that they've done from lessons beforehand. There has to be a worksheet where they match things
A bit
up.
like that write-in from that person who's saying that the creative process of teaching has been completely killed in her classroom because she's being told, or he is being told, you got to do this section, then this section, then this section, then this section. If you think back to your maths lesson where you just said, I've done it as well, loads of time, completely off script, I say very loosely. I needed to do that, and it was the right thing for the kids. It got them more engaged. I got to the outcome in a better way. But if I was told I have to stick with fidelity to the scheme and what our school has decided, whether they put in extra measures like that, the person that's written in, it would have been a worse lesson. That is why I'm so against that sort of stuff. I do think it probably comes from a good place, and SLT and school leaders are probably just trying to guarantee that certain pedagogies are being engaged and used in the classroom, but I just think it backfires. It
also, a part of it, again, like I'm saying, parts of a scheme are more important in terms of, if you buy a scheme in, mostly, and I'm not saying every scheme, but mostly it's going to give you good coverage of the curriculum. It's going to ensure that you are covering that curriculum. Whereas if you've got bitty lessons from the past, it's like walking to a school sometimes. Oh, we do the Maya topic, for example, and it's bits of lessons from the past 5, 6, 7 years. And in one lesson, we make a mask. That is creativity, right? But I think there's a discussion to have as to whether just simply making a mask for the sake of making a mask might not be the best lesson we can give our kids. But you know what we can do? We can do a hybrid. We're allowed to do things that are enjoyable for the children. We don't have to only do them. But if we completely swing the pendulum the other way and go, we're going to follow this scheme, and I'm going to, if I'm in a history lesson, and because, you, as a primary school teacher, quite often you share planning, and a lot of your afternoon planning is historical. It's been there for a while. Maybe you have a big change when a new scheme comes in and you share out your planning. So a lot of the time you're picking up lessons other people have done as well. When it's absolutely bang on what the scheme says, that makes sense from a management point of view, because you're going to get consistency. So I understand that. But when you actually pick up a lesson and deliver it to your kids, if you're halfway through your afternoon and you're thinking, I've never been more bored than I am right now, and these kids look bored, and it's completely uninspiring, it's a bad lesson. And it doesn't matter how much it follows the curriculum. It doesn't matter how much it follows the aims of what you're trying to do. It doesn't matter how much it's like the room down the corridor. That's irrelevant. It doesn't make it a good lesson.
I agree.
If the kids are completely uninspired and can't be bothered to do their learning because they're bored, you're teaching a bad lesson.
And then your next staff meeting is all about the absence crisis in your school and how we're going to start introducing attendance awards to better that. And you're sat there thinking, do you know what might help? Is not delivering really boring lessons all the time.
Completely.
That's where I find it so hard. Working in schools.
My ultimate thing, I think I said it recently on the podcast, was you have to just be able to, as a teacher, as a professional, choose to change something or do something differently. And I think, again, the message to leadership is trust your staff to do that. Because otherwise we are going down the road of Joe Bloggs off the street could come in and be a teacher because we're just delivering a lesson that's pre-done. And that person becomes correct on TikTok, who says teachers are just overpaid for reading slides. It seems like that might be what's happening in some places.
We're pushing
and
that
that's
way.
bad.
Do you think, if you were a school leader, then just be really super clear, because I hate the idea that anyone misconstruing what we're saying here. Do you think they shouldn't buy in schemes?
Not at all. What I'm saying here is schemes can be really helpful. But like with everything that we've ever said, you have to have some nuance with it. When you come in and say, we've bought a scheme, by the way, guys, from the ground up, replan everything. Usually, if a leader's saying that, it's not them who'll pick up the workload.
No.
It's the teachers who pick up the workload. And the teachers are picking up the workload, replanning lessons they know will be uninspiring for the children.
Yeah.
They know, sure, it's going to increase coverage and it might be better in terms of when Ofsted come in and can tick a box. And that's the external pressures we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's why leaders are under pressure to do this. And that's why they do it. They're not doing it for fun. They're not doing it just to wind us up. They're doing it because they think it's going to be better for the school as a whole. But you have to trust your teachers. And I think we're going to come on to now, well, what can we actually do then? What can we actually do as teachers to bolster this creativity? Because again, I want to make this link. Teachers being able to be creative in their lesson planning is going to enable children to be creative in their learning and their outcomes and boost that as well. It's not just, oh, I want to be creative in my job. Isn't that sad? No, it's the impact it's going to have on the children as well. So the first thing I'd say, you work in a school where it's from the top down, you're told you have to do this. You have to do this. Number one, open up at the discussion. Talk about it openly. Don't just sit there and moan about it. Literally go back and say, look, like our whole department here, our whole year group are saying, this is going to have this kind of impact. And if the pushback is tough, you've got to do it. Maybe you've got to move schools.
Yeah. Or you've just got to be a bit more confident with talking about the specifics. Like I know in the past, I wish I'd thought more about how I can now talk about creativity. In the past, I was just like, it's just a bit boring. What I really what I should have said was, I really like this scheme for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. It gives me great structure and coverage across the curriculum, and it's ensuring that, and it's reducing my workload in that aspect. I don't have to go and do that now, so thank you. However, it's really stifling creativity in the classroom, and I think that's going to have a very negative impact for all the reasons we've just discussed. So can we, as a school, please have a staff meeting or some training where we look at this scheme, we're not losing the overall aspects of why we've brought this in. So if Ofsted come in, we can still say, we brought this scheme to tackle this problem. And here it is. It addresses workload. It gives us really good coverage, and it gives us great school-wide coverage as well. Like we have themes that run through the school now because we've got this scheme, and that's why we brought this scheme in. However, when it comes to the delivery of lessons, we've also worked on creativity because we want to foster children's engagement and blah, 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 blah. I think you can say all this, and Ofsted will not be turning around saying, oh no, lack of fidelity here. They're not going to say that.
The ultimate example of how we know that is because we went through an Ofsted inspection where maths went through a deep dive. You and I lead maths in our school, and we said exactly that about White Rose. We said exactly that in terms of we've got it in because it makes sure that from year 3 to year 6, we know we're getting that coverage and that progression that we need. But also we have delivered training to our staff, which says that based on the children in front of you, you may need to increase or decrease the pace you go through the curriculum, and you may need to increase or decrease the pitch that you're leveling things at for the children in front of you. And that's good practice. And anything that gets rid of that, which you could argue is a bit of creativity, being able to change a lesson, but also just those wow and inspiring things. That is part of inspiring your children and getting them to make progress. It's not creativity or progress. Creativity feeds progress and make things better. So you're absolutely right. I think you have to push things back very specifically, like you said. List the good things about the scheme. Don't go to someone and just say, this is dreadful, 100% bad, blah, blah, blah. List the good things, say why it's great, but then talk about the drawbacks and be professional about it.
Yeah, and top tip, the way I can summarize this tip, I guess, is once you've had that dialogue, this is what you should do. You should look at every single lesson, right? Let's say you're focusing on geography or history, whatever. You should look at every single lesson, whether you've planned it or you're looking retrospectively, and have a discussion with your whole team and say, what element of this lesson is creative and inspiring? And if there's none, I tell you what, there's a red flag right there, and this is your chance to say, let's change something. We don't have to change the whole lesson, scrap it, get a new scheme in. I'm just saying, just look at an element of the lesson, maybe in the middle or at the start or at the end or something. You can sit down as a team and say, should we add in this task because it's creative and inspiring and engages their curious minds? And do that for every lesson, as a team, as a school. I'm not just speaking to teachers, I'm speaking to SLT, I'm speaking to everybody here. That's something you can action right now.
I remember at the start of my career, one thing that was amazing were wow days. Were those interactive, it's Roman Day. We're gonna dress up as a Roman, or we're gonna have interactive activities that, you know, the sole purpose of doing this is to inspire you for our topic, is to get you to want to learn about it. We had one for ancient Egypt. I remember being in year 4, ancient Egyptians. This was like in 2016. We had a wow day at the start, and there were like 7 different activities going on. In the corner, there were some mummies being made. Children were wrapping each other up in toilet paper. Over in the other corner, we had trays filled with sand with some brushes, and they were digging up artifacts. None of this is trackable. None of this is going off a scheme.
Yeah.
None of this is Ofsted being able to see on a piece of paper, oh, wow, you've managed to go from X to Y and you've retrieved so much information. But you know what it did? Every single person in my class was so excited for the Egyptian unit.
Yep.
And what it meant was, if we're thinking about, oh, only academics are important, only remembering facts are important. Okay, even if you think that, being creative and having those moments of inspiration improves that anyway. It's all leading into everything. It's such an important, vital part of our job, which is being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Because if you think, oh no, the scheme has 9 lessons I've got to fit in, I've only got room for 6, we definitely don't have time for that wow day anymore. If you're losing that, it's not a good scheme.
I'll tell you what, a little bonus tip you just made me think of then when you said, oh no, the scheme has 9 lessons. Another little thing you can do, particularly with the afternoon curriculums here, is just remind yourself that the curriculum's about a page for some of these things.
Yeah.
And these 9 lessons, although I'm sure they're fantastic and they've really thought in the scheme about this lovely progression, you could probably take out majority of them and still not be like contradicting the curriculum because they're making them up.
Yeah.
Like the curriculum doesn't say you have to do 9 lessons on the Mayans.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like you can probably, as a school, without losing fidelity to the scheme, but just take out a couple of them because it doesn't fit your time. You haven't got enough time to do it. And that is also completely okay. So I want to move on to another tip now. I feel like we've talked about some of the bigger things and like everything we've said about here was about inspiring the culture of creativity in the school. But there are some little things you can do in the classroom as well, such as using elements of drama. You don't have to do a whole drama lesson to use a bit of drama, right? Some of the best activities I've ever done, and this happens genuinely for any lesson. You could probably shoehorn it into anything from maths to English to science to history, right? Do a bit of hot seating. Why not? Do a bit of hot seating. Add it into your lesson. Spend 5 minutes. Do a conscience alley. I remember doing that with, I think me and you actually delivered this lesson years ago. It was something to do with the Egyptians.
Oh, it was Lord Carnarvon and like,
yes.
you know, because he's a very rich person coming in and Africa and exploiting maybe the
That's
locals.
Right.
Yeah.
And with Tutankhamun, it was an Egyptian topic, wasn't it?
Oh, it was about like, should we open the tomb or not? Because it's an ancient Egyptian thing and you're a foreigner coming in.
And we had half the kids on one side of the room that kind of being like one side of his conscience and half the class the other side like saying the positives and negative things. So it was like, they had this, and it was great, and it took like minutes, but it got the kids inspired and curious as to like, oh yeah, maybe there's different ways we can think about, maybe there's different ways we can interpret history and different perceptions, you know?
Oh, but the scheme said we have to do this because there's going to be a worksheet and we have to have either side of it and we have to fill in a pro and against and we have to get 3 bullet points down. No, you don't.
Yeah.
There's more than one way of delivering a point. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
And you know what? If you're really in one of those schools where they're just adamant, you can do both.
Yeah.
Do that activity first. What a great way of getting them to get ideas to then go and write. If they've got to go and do the annoying written task for them to regurgitate the thing they've already just learned.
Yeah.
At least they've had a nice way of learning it rather than you standing there at the front and telling them all these facts for them to write down in their book 3 seconds later.
Completely true. The ultimate example of this again is I'm thinking back to this year in my practice where I made up a debate. Like I made up this, I can't even remember. We were debating, we were learning about ancient Egypt and the debate ended up being whether or not the British Museum should send back to Egypt the Egyptian artifacts. Because the point being, they're literally Egyptian artifacts. We've potentially taken them through ways that we shouldn't have.
Yep.
But the point being with the children was there are Egyptian artifacts in Britain. Egypt want them back. Should we send them back to Egypt? And that developed into a whole debate in the classroom where I taught the children how debates work as well. So we did this whole vote at the start before anyone spoke. And we said, what side are you on? What do you think is the right thing to do? We should send them back or we shouldn't. Then we did the debate and we did what you have a go, you can respond. And we went backwards and forwards. And then we did another vote halfway through.
That's cool.
And then some of them changed sides and they were like, oh my God, you moved across. And like, I've been convinced. And then I said, okay, and now we could finish here, but now you're in your new groups, get together. What's your number one argument you've got here? And let's finish it off and then have a final vote. And we did a final vote. And I explained to them how if you're judging a debate, it's not always just who has the most votes wins. It's who had the biggest difference. So if you've convinced 4 people to move over, even if you have fewer, you could argue you've won the debate.
Right. Okay.
Because you've got the biggest change.
Okay,
And we talked about the difference between the amount of people who think something or the amount of people who change their mind and why one's not necessarily better than the other. If it was a vote, this side would still win. But the debate has changed more minds that way. And we spoke about debates. I mean, and the kids loved it so much. And I know they loved it because for their next 2 weeks, I had people, can we do debate?
Yeah, can we do
Can
it
we do a
again?
debate, please?
Can
Can we do it again? Because it was completely different to what we'd normally do.
Yeah.
It wasn't just me stood at the front regurgitating facts. This person thought this and the other person thought that. And then they had an argument and then they decided that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
That's the same thing, but way more boring, way less interesting. The kid's not engaged.
And as a teacher, you can channel that energy. You can channel what you did there, that creativity, that inspiration, into whatever you want afterwards. So again, if you're a teacher that's thinking, yeah, but I just need to get something written down, you do that after then. Your next task then can be, let's write down our thoughts and feelings and maybe do an evaluation of our debate or something like that. Or it can not. It can be something else. But the point stands, going back to sort of your idea of wow days and things, it's the same concept, isn't it? We need to remember what our jobs are as teachers. We are not just deliverers. We are designers. We need to, our job is to inspire children to want to learn, to be curious. And we cannot do that without creativity. I cannot stress enough how important this concept of creativity is in all aspects, from our first prong to our second prong, you know?
And we have to push back. And the reason we have to push back on this slide towards delivery, is because eventually we won't have a profession anymore. If it ends up being, here is something that is pre-written and every single person does it exactly. And I'm not saying schemes are bad, because I've been a proponent for schemes, but I think we've been very clear about how schemes can be useful and how they should be used.
Yeah.
If it ends up just being, no, you have to say exactly this, like a script, what will end up happening is we won't be a profession anymore. We won't be highly skilled individuals delivering lessons because you simply don't need them. They're not designers anymore. The designing's been done and they are just delivering, and we'll get less qualified teachers in front of our children, and we don't want that.
Let's finish this episode by going back to the start. I'm going to ask you the same question that you asked me. Has creativity died in the classroom then?
In many classrooms, yes. In some classrooms, no. And I think what this discussion has to be here, and why we've done this episode, is we have to talk about it because it's happening. Creativity is dying. Okay, has it gone completely? Obviously not. But we have to push back, and we have to understand that creativity, whether it's in the literal lesson itself and why it's important to do the arts, or just actually how creativity as a skill and as a profession when you're planning a lesson can impact the children positively, it all comes full circle to creativity is vital in education, and we have to protect it. And the fact it's dying is sad, and we have to talk about it, and we have to push back on it.
I agree. So you know what you got to do, teachers?
Be creative and leave us a review.
I love
Is
it.
that creative?
Great segue.
Leaving us a 5-star review?
I think so.
Creative. Maybe there could be a creative way that you could share this episode with your friends.
Oh, yeah.
Do a story and maybe like an interpretive dance behind it or something.
Yeah, maybe you could hot seat me.
Yeah.
And I could hot seat you.
Yeah.
And well, that's just a podcast.
Imagine two podcasters saying how important creativity is. That's essentially what we're doing right now, aren't we?
And there we go. We'll leave it with that, shall we?
Drama's important. Otherwise, you wouldn't have Teach, Sleep, Repeat.